Greetings and salutations, loyal viewers of this channel. My name is Sean, and it turns out the jury in the Daniel Penny case is deadlocked as of right now. They have sent a note to the judge indicating that they cannot reach a verdict on the top charge, and it appears that Daniel Penny might be headed for a mistrial, which is good news for all of us who think that his self-defense case is valid. Obviously, an acquittal would be much better, but this is better than a wrongful conviction. Now, I'm going to get into the good news and the positive aspects of this, as well as the downsides of this. But first, I want to thank everybody who supports this channel via actualjusticeword.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money. Okay?
Breaking news at noon, the jury says it is deadlocked in the Daniel Penny trial following days of deliberations.
So look, I've done multiple different videos on this channel going over the facts of the Daniel Penny case. You can watch those videos. They will be linked in the description if you want a longer explanation. But here's the quick explanation before we move on to the new details. So Daniel Penny was riding the subway. He was on his way to school. He was going to go to the gym after that, when all of a sudden Jordan Neely, a former Michael Jackson impersonator and a homeless schizophrenic who was high on drugs, ended up stepping onto the train. Neely decided that he was going to threaten all these different various passengers. He said things like, "I don't care if I go to prison for the rest of my life," and obviously this created an environment of threat on said train. Daniel Penny ends up stepping up, restraining Jordan Neely, and Jordan Neely may have died as a complication of that restraint after the fact. That being said, everybody on the train agrees that Neely was threatening them. The idea that you have to wait for somebody to be assaulted after they're threatening the lives of all these different people before you intervene is ridiculous, so Daniel Penny should not have been charged with any crime. That being said, a video of him that was cropped in, by the way, to ignore the people of color who were assisting Daniel Penny in the restraint of Jordan Neely went viral, and people started saying, "Oh wow, evil white racist hurt an innocent Bebe Angel black person," and ignored all the things that Neely did to warrant that interference. Of course, that ultimately ended up leading to District Attorney Alvin Bragg's prosecution office filing charges against Penny for political reasons, and now his self-defense case is up for debate, up for discussion, and we've moved on from the trial phase to the jury phase, where they will decide his fate on two charges, a manslaughter and a criminally negligent homicide. But the jury, as of right now, appears to be deadlocked.
Yeah, good afternoon, first of all, to you there, Teresa, and the jury sending the note to the judge at 11:03 this morning. When that note came into the courtroom, and our colleague Michelle Ross is in that courtroom, so she is communicating to us everything that is going on inside there. When they received that note, defense attorneys read the note, and then the prosecutor read the note. Michelle is telling me that when the prosecutor read that note, she looked down and she grinned. It was not a grin of happiness. It was a grin of, "I cannot believe I'm reading this. I just can't believe it." Well, what she couldn't believe is that the jury is deadlocked on count one.
Now look, a lot of people who are in support of Daniel Penny are very happy about this result as of right now, because a mistrial is not a conviction, and this would likely even encourage the Manhattan District Attorney's Office to not prosecute Daniel Penny going forward, because likely they would end up with the same results, and those results would be a mistrial. However, Linda Schmidt is going to break down even more benefits for Penny, but then I'm going to have to rain on your guys' parade, because there is a downside to this on the top line charge that I think is being overlooked by many in the news media. But let's hear some of the positive information first.
Note. Michelle is telling me that when the prosecutor read that note, she looked down and she grinned. It was not a grin of happiness. It was a grin of, "I cannot believe I'm reading this. I just can't believe it." Well, what she couldn't believe is that the jury is deadlocked on count one. That is the more serious charge, manslaughter, which faces where Daniel Penny would face a term of up to 15 years in prison. As a result of them not being able to reach a unanimous verdict on the first charge, they are not allowed to move on to the second charge. So at this point, they are deadlocked.
So first of all, let's be perfectly honest. It is absolutely cruel for them to send Linda Schmidt out into the cold in order to make this report. But all joking aside, what she said about the reactions from everybody in the courtroom makes a lot of sense. The defense has no reported reaction, but the prosecution seems to be flummoxed by this because they expected a conviction in this particular case. And by the way, I think it's important right now that I talk about the prosecutor in this particular case, because a lot of attention, and rightfully so, has been shined on Alvin Bragg, the woke George Soros Soros-funded district attorney who doesn't prosecute any real criminals for anything, but does all these politically motivated cases, but not as much attention has been shined on the litigator in this particular case, and this is a woman who has repeatedly said that she goes softer on black criminals that she knows are guilty of serious crimes, including murder, because they're so disadvantaged by the system. Don't believe me? Hear it in her own words.
So I'm going to give you an example of something that I did with a recent case of mine, and this has never been done in my office. I had a murder case where the defendant did not intentionally kill the victim. He went into an ATM on the Upper West Side and tried to rob an individual. Unfortunately, it was an older individual. He was 86. And in the course of the robbery, he fell to the ground. And as a result, he died. This is, under the law, a felony murder, which is akin to intentional murder. However, when I first got the case, I learned, I took the time to learn about the defendant. And it was a strong case, so it wasn't about a whodunit. I knew immediately who did it. I could prove it. I could take it to trial that day and win it. But it wasn't about that. It was that the more I learned about the defendant and his life and the circumstances, the kinds of things that Jarrell was talking about, that one should take into account the trauma of that individual, I really felt incredibly sorry for him that he had gotten to that point in his life where he felt like there was no other choice but to commit this robbery.
Yeah, so this woman is a radical leftist activist, and many people online are reporting that she is referring to Daniel Penny as the white man repeatedly throughout this case. However, I do want to point out that I haven't actually found confirmation of that outside of Twitter, so if you've seen that, there is a chance that that could be misinformation, but obviously, based on her previous history, based on her activism, based on her previous sentiments, whether she's actually saying that or not in the courtroom makes no matter. She is interested in this case because here you have a black criminal, somebody arrested 42 times, somebody who broke the nose of an elderly woman, who has attacked people multiple times, who actually tried to kidnap a child at one point in time, and she thinks that person's an innocent baby angel Aladdin. And the contrast of that, you have a well put together white guy, a Marine, who intervened on behalf of others in a selfless act, and she thinks that guy's the criminal because, gosh darn it, white privilege, aren't white people so bad in the way that they help other people that they don't know because they're not bad and this is nonsense. So that's the perspective of this person, and I do like the idea that she's grinning with confusion and she doesn't understand what's going on because she lives in that leftist bubble where nobody thinks that defending others is acceptable and you should just let the innocent baby angel criminals do whatever they want. Essentially, this woman comes from the same social circles as Emma Vigeland, who says you should just let people assault you on the train, and it's kind of bourgeois for you to be concerned with your own safety.
I was hit at one point sitting on the subway by a man who was having a mental health episode. He sat next to me and he was elbowing and kind of flailing around and hit me in the face and in my body, and it was jarring, right? The idea that I would want him to be hurt in any way, I just didn't want to be near him in that moment because I understood something was going on here. Every one of us who's taken public transit has had this kind of situation, something similar happen, seeing someone struggling. That doesn't mean that our fear in that instance, and I was a little scared because I was hit.
It's a problem. Like, it's people that need help.
But my fear is not the primary object of like what we should be focusing on right now. It's the fact that this person is in pain. And so, like, the politics of dehumanization privileges the bourgeois kind of concern of people's, like, immediate discomfort in this narrow instance, as opposed to larger humanity and life. It's really freaking twisted.
Yeah,
So again, her reaction and her being stunned, hilarious. Her getting a mistrial and suffering the humiliation of that, amazing. Totally on board with it. Obviously, I would prefer a not guilty verdict, but this is also entertaining for me. That being said, let's get into some more details of this so you can understand what the judge's response is, and of course, what the implications of them never agreeing on the top charge could possibly be.
Now, I just want to fill you in on something else here as well. The jury just came into the room. The judge talking to the jury saying this is not uncommon. There are many times when juries are unable to reach a unanimous decision. He wants them to continue to deliberate, but if they are unable to reach a unanimous verdict on that first count, this will end in a deadlocked jury, and they possibly will have to try him again.
So first of all, it should be 12-0 not guilty on the first count right off the jump, but under New York law, as you just heard right there, if they can't reach a unanimous verdict on the first charge, they're actually not allowed to move on to the criminally negligent homicide charge. They have to either vote up or down on the top line, or it's going to be a mistrial, and that sounds like, again, it would be good for Daniel Penny. However, the judge actually ended up calling the jury into the room. He ended up talking to them and essentially encouraged them to try to reach a unanimous verdict, informing them that this case is basically going to be over if they don't, and it will be a mistrial. Now, here's where I'm a bit worried for Daniel Penny, because one of the things that a lot of juries like to do once they're in the jury room is do compromise verdicts. So they might not be able to reach a verdict on this particular first charge, but I'm hoping that the people who are on the not guilty side end up holding the line on that. Obviously, I don't want it to turn into a guilty for Daniel Penny, and eventually you end up getting to a not guilty verdict on that. However, some of those people who are unwilling to move on the first charge, on the top charge, might end up, after they set that aside, going to the second charge and deciding that they're going to compromise with their fellow jurors and end up going with a guilty verdict on that. And to me, this is a disastrous result. This is something that I definitely don't want to happen. I would prefer a mistrial to this, because to me, this is a violation of the spirit of the law, because in reality, you're not supposed to compromise in this way, although I am under the belief that this happens all the time once the jury goes into deliberation. So yeah, this could be a good sign for Penny, them being deadlocked on the first charge, because this could ultimately end up resulting in a not guilty on the top charge, or result in a deadlocked jury, which would make the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, if they want to get him, have to go through all of this all over again. That being said, it also could be sowing the seeds for future destruction of Penny, because if it's not very many people on the not guilty side and they're deadlocked on this particular issue, they could end up reaching some kind of compromise where they decide, okay, not guilty, let's talk about the second charge, and then there's all this social pressure for people to end up complying with the second charge. Now, I would be totally fine if they did not guilty on the top charge and then the second charge they were like deadlocked or whatever, but it requires people in that jury room who have sat through the trial and should know more about this than all of us to hold the line on this particular issue.
Very difficult job it's for the defense attorneys right here, because they really have a lot of control, at least with what they ask the judge to do. So they could have asked the judge to instruct the jury, okay, don't consider count one and just go to count two, which is criminally negligent homicide.
Right.
And often in murder cases, Linda, you get criminally negligent homicide in a murder case, you're very happy. But this is not that type of a case. They don't want criminally negligent homicide. They want a full acquittal or a hung jury. So what they asked the judge, I believe they should have asked for a mistrial right away before the jury comes in. Judge, declare a mistrial right now, declare a hung jury right now. The judge would deny that. It's too soon, it's too early. So then you ask what's called an Allen charge. And an Allen charge is a very serious kind of push to the jurors to reach a decision. You read to me what took place in the courtroom. That's what you would call like an Allen charge light. Like, he didn't really put a lot of pressure on them, but he told them the truth, which is, if you guys can't reach a verdict, we're just going to do this all over again. So let's try to go back in there, take a deep breath, have some lunch, and let's go back to the beginning. Because the way the verdict sheet reads is manslaughter in the second degree. If you find him guilty of this count, do not go down to criminally negligent homicide.
So yeah, they give you a little bit of insight of the gamesmanship that that's going on with the defense attorney on whether or not they should have asked for a mistrial or asked the judge to kind of push them in the direction of reaching a verdict in a harsh way, which is something the judge has the power to do. They describe it as an Allen charge, but to be clear, they could have also asked for them to move on from the first charge, set it aside, go to the second charge, but the defense team doesn't want the second charge. They're not trying to get a conviction on anything. They believe, just like many of you out there in my audience and myself, that Daniel Penny is entitled to a full acquittal in this particular case, and any compromise significantly undermines the right to self-defense in New York City, which, by the way, already has badly written self-defense laws, in my opinion, as well, but they should still be able to hold for this particular case, because essentially, there is no way for you to be able to intervene with non-lethal force, and yes, it was non-lethal force despite the fact that Jordan Neely died, to help others that are being threatened until after, apparently, those people are being attacked and being potentially mortally wounded with a weapon. And to me, this is an absurdity. This is ridiculous. And of course, the double standard that has been proven out by this particular case, in that Daniel Penny is facing all these charges, but the person of color who assisted him in the restraint ended up with an immunity deal, should not be ignored, especially, again, when you consider the political activism of this woke litigator that's in the courtroom opposite the defense team. So yeah, I do believe that this could still result in a conviction. They haven't even considered the second charge, but the longer this goes on, the closer we get to an acquittal, and an acquittal on the top charge is very beneficial. It is very positive. However, in order to validate the self-defense rights of all New Yorkers, I think it is absolutely crucial that he gets an acquittal from top to bottom. Also, a lot of people are telling me about how Eric Adams has flipped on this particular case, and while it is nice for him to flip on this case right now, I just want to point out that at the time, Eric Adams was stoking the racial tensions by saying, "Oh, Jordan, what an innocent baby angel Aladdin. Jordan has the same name that I gave my son. Isn't he a precious baby angel?"
My fellow New Yorkers, this has been a week of strong emotions in our city. One of our own is dead. A black man, black like me. A man named Jordan, the name I gave my son. A New Yorker who struggled with tragedy, trauma, and mental illness. A man whose last words were a cry for help. A man named Jordan Neely. Jordan's death has devastated his family and shocked his fellow New Yorkers. Today, I'm here to talk about Jordan's life before he got on that train.
So Eric Adams, in my opinion, can go take a walk for the way that he handled this case, because his pushing and ginning up racial hysteria about this is one of the main reasons why Daniel Penny is in this predicament in the first place, because again, this was a politically motivated prosecution from top to bottom. Daniel Penny should have never been charged, and while a hung jury is great, while them not reaching a verdict is fantastic and should shame the prosecution out of pursuing this case going forward, an acquittal is what we should get as the American people, as New Yorkers, because Daniel Penny did nothing wrong. Now, of course, I would like to hear what you guys have to say. As per usual, if you like this video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on all my social medias, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about the potential for a hung jury in the Penny case. Till next time.